Just as the galaxy was about to fade into obscurity, it was saved by a marketing and merchandising flex so powerful it smashed the existing historical record and set a new course into the future. It delivered a phantom blockbuster whose presence could only be detected by the area of impact it created and the aftershocks that continue to ripple through all pop culture media today. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire. Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire was a 1996 Star Wars movie promotional experience set between the events of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi that encompassed nearly everything associated with the sale of a blockbuster Star Wars movie except a movie. How can you have a movie without a movie? Different parts of the multimedia experience focus on different characters on different perspectives of the overarching story. A video game, comic books, novels, a soundtrack, a role-playing game, trading cards, posters, statues, action figures, and more, but no movie. What's the deal with no movie? Notorious bounty hunter Boba Fett has captured Han Solo, a hero of the rebellion against the Empire, and frozen him in carbonite to make sure that he can't escape delivery to intergalactic crime lord Jabba the Hutt, who Solo owes a lot of money. Solo's friends and fellow rebels, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and Lando Calrissian, search the galaxy, hoping to find and rescue him before it's too late. They are joined in their efforts by new rebel ally for hire Dash Rendar, who proved his value as a pilot during the Battle of Hoth, a small victory salvaged from a crushing defeat at the hands of the overwhelming might of the Empire. Meanwhile, the evil Darth Vader continues his search for Luke Skywalker, hoping to either team up with him to destroy the Emperor or deliver Luke to the Emperor for destruction. Meanwhile, a similar plan has been hatched by Prince Xizor, another intergalactic crime lord looking to make a name for himself in the eyes of the Empire. Xizor figures if he can kill Luke Skywalker, it will raise his status and potentially make him the Emperor's new BFF and totally embarrass Vader. Xizor has a vast criminal empire called the Black Sun at his disposal. He has dedicated soldiers, weapons, and both legitimate and illegitimate businesses providing all the revenue he needs to counter Vader's sorcerer's ways. Xizor also has the ability to emit pheromones. This complicates things when Princess Leia attempts to confront Xizor about the attempts on Luke's life, and Xizor, attempts to make her love him. Vader is trying to kill Xizor. Xizor is trying to kill Luke. Luke is trying to finish his own training as a Jedi. Chewbacca gets a haircut. Lando works to make amends. Dash Rendar isn't in this for your rebellion. He just wants to get paid. And whenever Boba Fett is in a scene, all the other characters are asking, "Where's Boba Fett?" Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire was a deliberate attempt to resuscitate Star Wars as a franchise ahead of much, much bigger things. It was the first round of what would become the new forever of Star Wars, and the first time the deck had to be cleared of what came before to make way for what needed to come next. Star Wars Episode IV: A New Hope, known at the time simply as Star Wars, was released in 1977. In 1997, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the revolutionary pop culture brand, Lucasfilm planned to re-release all three existing Star Wars movies with newly enhanced visual effects, THX and digital sound, and a few new surprises. As the trailer for the special edition tells us, it was necessary to do this, quote, "for a whole new generation who've yet to experience it on the big screen, and for everyone else to experience it again." Lucasfilm needed to prepare the pop culture landscape for the imminent arrival of the prequel trilogy that would begin 2 years later in 1999. But first, they intended to do a dry run of the Star Wars merchandising saturation campaign that accompanies every Star Wars film without the burden or expense of producing an actual film. If you can reap the benefits of all the promotion and residual licensing, why wouldn't you? Shadows of the Empire began in 1994 when Bantam editor Lou Aronica floated the idea of a Star Wars multimedia event to Lucasfilm publishing director Lucy Autry Wilson. 11 years since Return of the Jedi, 5 years until The Phantom Menace, there was plenty of time to begin a Star Wars reintroduction campaign, filling in some gaps between existing films, tapping all the Lucasfilm resources until such time as the feature films resumed the mainline storytelling. Lucasfilm, in full prequel mode, began preparing for a story set between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, the young heroic characters that people remembered at their best, fresh off a pivotal victory against the Empire, a bright future full of war ahead of them. But hold up, John Knowles, a game designer who had worked on Star Wars Dark Forces, suggested that there was more drama to be had and that fewer stories had been told historically in the period of time between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. If the centerpiece was going to be the novel, it could be what no novel had done before. It could do what no novel had done before. F that up. But before you can start a project like this, you need to ask one question. What is canon? From 1991 to 1993, a series of novels by Timothy Zahn had been published which, for all intents and purposes, were the legitimate continuation of the Skywalker saga, expanding the universe of the original trilogy. If the 3 prequels were next in line for Lucasfilm, at best, the feature film continuation post-Return of the Jedi was over a decade away. For now, the Zahn trilogy of novels, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command were factual fiction. And that was good, because people seemed to like them. But what about everything else? Since 1977, there had been a lot of comics, and novels, and cartoons, and Ewok adventures, stamp sets, paintable ceramic statuettes, all of it licensed, all of it official, and dear to different parts of the fan base. Steve Perry, who had never been the lead singer of Journey, was selected to write the novel which would be the main conduit of the story, The Film Substitute. Perry had previously written novels for both the Jim Carrey version of The Mask and the Aliens franchise. Perry had to find a way to be true to the classic characters, but not get bogged down in the details of nearly 2 decades of content that he could not possibly take the time to experience and absorb. He settled for the 3 original films and the first novel ever written for the series, Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster, published in 1978, just after the original movie and before everything else existed in the Star Wars universe. With Han Solo out of commission for the duration of the Shadows of the Empire event, someone was going to have to fill that role, not just as the devil-may-care free agent walking a careful line through the galactic civil war looking to stack paychecks, but also as the balance to the other character personalities and motivations throughout the story. Dash Rendar filled that role almost too good. Like Han, he's from Corellia, he's quick with snappy comebacks, and he owns a ship called the Outrider, whose design owes an awful lot to the Millennium Falcon. Unlike Han, Perry could kill him if he needed to for the story. Lucy Autry Wilson came up with the name Xizor, saying, quote, "I came up with the name Xizor based on a cool Portuguese sound. I had an old Portuguese boyfriend named Chico with the X sound pronounced sh. I'd always liked that sh sound, and I just combined it with the Zor ending of Razor to get a name that had an exotic and dangerous connotation to it. Another win for razors in the Star Wars universe." When situations arose where Perry did need to get bogged down in the details, like for a space map of where and how far apart all the important planets are, he initially turned to Lucasfilm. Surely, he assumed, someone had kept track of and charted all the key planets in the galaxy. When Lucasfilm stopped laughing, Perry turned to the fans who filled in the gaps with their endless enthusiasm for getting bogged down in the details. Shadows of the Empire, the novel, tells the core story of the series following the main characters from the original trilogy in their efforts to save Han Solo, protect Luke Skywalker, and avoid becoming collateral damage in the growing conflict between Vader and Xizor. Luke furthers his Jedi skills, including constructing a new lightsaber. Lando, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2 all play pivotal roles. We meet Dash Rendar, his droid Lebo, and Xizor's assistant/personal assassin Guri, an incredibly lifelike human replica droid. We see the Star Wars universe through the lens of the Godfather, the seedy criminal underworld that exists as a third entity outside the Empire and the Rebellion. Shadows of the Empire was also a 6-issue comic book series written by John Wagner, illustrated by Killian Plunkett. While the overarching story of the larger universe is the same, this series focuses on the point of view of Boba Fett and other bounty hunters like IG-88, Bossk, and Zuckuss. We also meet Renga Jixton, aka Jix, who works for Darth Vader to help protect Luke from the various attempts on Luke's life by Xizor. 2 additional mini-comics were included with Micro Machines toys produced by Galoob and model kits from Ertl. There was a Battle of the Bounty Hunters pop-up comic and a one-shot called The Jabba Tape featuring Jizzman, one of the members of Jabba's swoop biker gang. You say Gizman or Jizzman?
Oh god, Jizzman.
Years later, in 2000, Steve Perry returned to write Shadows of the Empire Evolution, which checks back in with Xizor's assistant/assassin Guri. After the events of Return of the Jedi, Ron Randall, P. Craig Russell, and Dave Nistel handle the art as Guri tries to figure out what she is, and while everyone else tries to figure out where she is because she's worth a lot to them for who she was and what she knows.
Nintendo 64 is here. Get into it.
Shadows of the Empire was also a video game developed by LucasArts for the Nintendo 64 and PC. It crossed game genres from first-person shooter to third-person shooter to flight to puzzle solving in an attempt to showcase not only what current technology was capable of, but also what Star Wars could be with current gaming technology. Shadows of the Empire was developed with the new characters in mind. Dash Rendar was a blank slate compared to Luke Skywalker, and that allowed the developers more room to go where they needed to with their depiction of the overall events. But he also had everything they needed to tell a Han Solo-ish type of story. The initial launch was on the Nintendo 64. Shadows of the Empire was intended as a launch title for the system, but that required learning the new hardware, the new controller specifically, and maybe a little more time than they had. The N64 controller wasn't even built yet. The team at LucasArts had to use a top-secret prototype version of the new controller that was just a modified Super Nintendo controller with a trigger and a joystick attached to it. In order to prevent exposure of the prototype and fulfill the terms of the non-disclosure agreement, developers had to keep their hands and the controller in a box while they were using it. In order to deliver a more cinematic experience, Shadows of the Empire was also going to need more memory. Nintendo made a special exception for the game, expanding the internal memory of the cartridge from 8 meg to 12 meg. This gave LucasArts the room to include an orchestral soundtrack as opposed to the digital music of previous Star Wars games. It also allowed them the space to include full-motion video animatic cutscenes and actual audio clips. Dash Rendar was played by John Saigon, Lebo is played by Tom Kane, Bob Bergen steps in as Luke Skywalker, while Nick Tate brought Prince Shizor to life. When Shadows of the Empire made its public debut at E3 in 1996, it didn't exactly blow the roof off the place. It certainly didn't meet the standard necessary for the blockbuster Star Wars spectacle that was being rolled out. Instead of launching with the N64 in September of 1996, it was delayed until December to polish it up a bit. That took a bite out of holiday sales, but it still sold out. So, in what may be an unprecedented merchandising move, Lucasfilm had a full orchestral soundtrack composed to accompany the event. As YouTuber Mike Case put it, quote, 1996 was wild. I bought a soundtrack for a book and I didn't even question it. I remember it being good. I wish I still had it, but my truck was stolen and every CD I owned was in a binder in it. Good news, Mike, it's on Spotify. The soundtrack was produced by Robert Townsend, who was never in the movie Meteor Man. Townsend had already worked with Lucasfilm on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. He almost got Lucasfilm to let him score the Timothy Zahn books a few years earlier. Townsend hired Joel McNeely to compose the music, another veteran of Lucasfilm, via the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. It was performed by the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, and while the majority of the compositions are fully original, some pieces of themes from the previous movies can be heard as well. The main title is in there, the Imperial March, the Force theme, some of the biggest hits in the Star Wars universe. Technically, the soundtrack was the first major piece of Shadows of the Empire to hit the market, arriving a week before the book. It was also part of the music heard in the N64 game, the last major piece in the rollout, making it part of the end of the 6-month event as well. Kenner Toys was purchased by Tonka in 1987, shortly after the original Star Wars line of action figures ended. Tonka, including Kenner, was purchased by Hasbro in 1991. In 1995, Hasbro used the Kenner branding to bring Star Wars figures, vehicles, and playsets back to the shelves with the Power of the Force 2 line. This continued with the subset of action figures tied into the Shadows of the Empire event, 3 3/4-inch scale versions of new characters like Dash Rendar and his Outrider spaceship, classic characters like Leia and her Bouche, do you say Bouche or Bouche? Leia and Chewbacca and Bounty Hunter disguises, a 2-pack with Darth Vader and Prince Shizor, Boba Fett versus IG-88, Luke in an Imperial Guard disguise, Han in Carbonite, Luke Jedi, and even a Rebel Snowspeeder. Galoob incorporated Shadows of the Empire into their regular Micro Machines line, as well as the slightly larger Action Fleet series. Ertl released model kits of Emperor Palpatine Shizor, Shizor's ship the Virago. Applause produced vinyl and resin figures of Dash Rendar and Shizor, the Emperor, and Darth Vader. Topps produced a 100-card set that crossed over into imagery from the 3 major storytelling sources, the novel, the game, and the comics. Art for the set was produced by Greg and Tim Hildebrandt, who created one of the most iconic Star Wars images in existence. The majority of the card set is a visual depiction of the key events in the novel. Shadows of the Empire existed on borrowed time. It was an experiment then, but what is it now? The special editions were released just a year later in 1997. One of the new surprises in A New Hope was the inclusion of ASP droids, swoop speeder bikes, and a ship that looks an awful lot like Dash Rendar's Outrider, all creations of Shadows of the Empire. Is their presence enough to legitimize the entirety of the 1996 event? Within the world of the movies, the prequel trilogy ends nearly 25 years prior to the events of Shadows of the Empire. Through 2011, there was no need to address anything that happened in Shadows or any of the expanded universe set after Return of the Jedi with respect to canon. That said, multiple novels from 1997 to 1999 set after Shadows of the Empire mention characters like Shizor and events that happened during Shadows of the Empire. In 2012, George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney. Disney's #1 priority was to start telling stories set after Return of the Jedi, ideally with the original cast that was still available, and to transition to the next generation of Star Wars adventures. Disney had to decide what to do with the expanded universe. 35 years of comics, movies, television shows, novels, video games, Presto Magics, puffy stickers, and Transformers. From hundreds of years before Phantom Menace to hundreds of years after Return of the Jedi, there was too much. Too much to be able to navigate accurately when so much of it was self-conflicting. Too much to hinder their own creativity in creating new characters and stories. As of 2014, nearly everything that had been created outside of the 6 existing feature films was reclassified as legends. A statement on StarWars.com from April 25th, 2014 explicitly says, quote, "George Lucas always made it clear that he was not beholden to the EU. He set the films he created as the canon." This includes the 6 Star Wars episodes and the many hours of content he developed and produced in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. These stories are the immovable objects of Star Wars history, the characters and events to which all other tales must align. Was it canon? Originally, yes. Did it stay canon? No. Is it canon now? No. But the post-2014 establishment of Legends as a holding area for the expanded universe has also become a treasure trove of material to be mined for new stories. Select elements that were once part of the universe, then removed, have once again been reestablished within the Star Wars mythology. The Falleen and Black Sun crime syndicate appeared in the Clone Wars animated series. Another ship that looks like the Outrider appeared in Star Wars Rebels. In 2018, Dash Rendar got name-checked in the solo movie tie-in book Tales from Vandor. The 2019 Galaxy's Edge cookbook has a recipe for Caesar salad. Caesar salad! Depending on which part of the Shadows of the Empire story you experienced, you may not know the actual fates of some of the characters in this Star Wars legend. Shizor is super dead. Guri survived. Dash was presumed dead, but he saw the moment as an opportunity to disappear. As the Outrider was caught in the blast of the destruction of Shizor's orbiting fortress Skyhook during a battle over Coruscant, he quickly engaged the hyperdrive and skipped town. Was there another ship that looked like the Outrider during the climactic battle at the end of Rise of Skywalker? Hard to tell. Maybe. If you want to believe it's there, it's there. Shadows of the Empire is a unique entity, not just for Star Wars, but for transmedia storytelling in general. Long before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Lucasfilm took a chance producing a multimedia event without a cornerstone piece in theaters carrying the load, betting that there was still enough excitement and love for Star Wars that they could still deliver everything else and have it matter. And that love persists today. The soundtrack is currently available on vinyl at holymountainprinting.com. In 2019, Limited Run Games re-released Shadows of the Empire in its original format for N64. In 1977, Star Wars established the modern blueprint for a multimedia merchandise rollout. Within 20 years, they had refined it to the point where the multimedia event could exist on its own. The success leading into the special editions, which propelled the prequels, which set off a chain reaction of events that continues to deliver storytelling across media and merchandising unabated through today and into the foreseeable future, and inspiring other franchises, resulting in this world of unceasing brand promotion. Is it canon? It doesn't matter. It isn't, but it doesn't matter. Shadows of the Empire proved that Star Wars can and will forever be reinvented to meet the market as it exists at the time the stories need to be told, regardless of what came before, in the interest of what needs to come next. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you haven't heard, we started streaming on Twitch. Find us twice a week at twitch.tv/toygalaxy. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, please visit our Patreon or become a YouTube channel member. Please share this video and let us know in the comments down below how many facets of the Shadows of the Empire multimedia launch you were able to immerse yourself in. I had the toys, obviously, the comics, and the game. Never read the novel, and only this week learned about the existence of the soundtrack. That said, I listened to it while I was writing the script for this episode and can confirm it sounds like Star Wars music.
That's good, I guess. Cut.